allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is the Committee for Menantic Creek. This, I know there's been an active group on Menantic Creek, but this came up with wastewater treatment when we did our consultants brought in some water studies showing that the flow goes directly from the center into Menantic Creek. So it's kind of like we have the Fresh Pond group. I think the Menantic Creek people would like to say a few words, and then we're gonna, Stephen here?
Yeah, he'll be right back. I don't know where.
Okay, all right.
For it.
Alice Dupree, for the Menantic Creek Group. And we've been talking about Menantic Creek with Joe and the WAC for several years now. Just because, I mean, I've been there all my life and the conditions have changed dramatically in my lifetime and the lifetime of my son. And you know, Meg, I mean, we used to scoop all kinds of live stuff out of there. It was almost nothing. So we assembled an informal group and started meeting about a year ago. We've been zooming back and forth. I've been to WAC, I've been to WQI to discuss this. You know, we know that there's septic issues around the creek. We know there's been no dredging for years in the creek. In fact, in the creek, almost never. The recent study that shows it flowing in, and we have algae blooms every summer that are just devastating. A lot of sea life die-off. So we've consulted with WAC several times, and in the past months, we've met and discussed our project with Joe and Caitlin Cunningham, who's a physical scientist for the USGS Water Science Center. And she was introduced to us through the WAC and Peter Grant. Caitlin has given us guidance on how to go about testing for dissolved oxygen content, salinity, and temperature, so that we could procure equipment and develop a protocol for a citizen science project on the creek. She's offered her guidance to help us get this moving and continue to work with us. She's also involved with the South Ferry site. So she is very familiar with what we're dealing with and all of that. The project we propose is one which will evaluate water quality at 3 dock locations along the creek. One at the head of the creek, one midway, and one near the mouth of the creek. We'll, from spring through fall, every 15 minutes, continuously monitor dissolved oxygen content, specific conductivity or salinity, and temperature using deployed logging devices at the 3 locations along the creek. Protocol has been developed to download weekly, clean equipment, and redeploy. We have developed documents to record visual observations and record the measurements each time the downloading is done. So we can see what the tide was, what we see happening in the water, and anything else that seems pertinent to what we're going for. And our objectives are to identify baseline water quality conditions and trends, increase public awareness of the issues with real information, and work with toward viable strategies and solutions to restore the health of the creek, and also to develop measurements and comparisons of conditions along the creek throughout this year prior to the dredging at the opening to the creek, and see what impact the dredging and we hope increased tidal flow will be. On Thursday, May 4th, I presented this project to the WQI and outlined just what I told you now. They indicated that we needed to formally organize our group, see what financial support our group might contribute to the effort, and submit a written request to be considered for funding. So following that, several of us discussed options, organizational steps, and following those conversations, we came to understand that we need to be a formal organization rather than the informal organization we currently are. And that our options to do that are either to form a Menantic Creek Association and partner with the town, or in the interim, I think we want to do that anyway, request a town citizen committee to be formed to focus on Menantic Creek so that we can move this along sooner rather than later. With the financial support of the members of the Creek Keepers, it was decided that we could, at least we have everybody enough commitment to fund one additional monitoring station at this time. And we have ordered that equipment. And in fact, it has been delivered to my house. So we've spent about $3,000, $2,901 for the equipment, but including calibration fluids and hardware, so that we can get this up and running within the next couple of weeks. And it also appears that the most expedient organizational process is to come to you and ask that you help us understand how we form a town citizen committee, such as they did at Fresh Pond, to be able to work with Joe, who has supported us all along on this, and so that we can get on board, as soon as possible this season. And so we're here to ask for that support and that guidance.
And the reason Joe's not here, he has a county meeting today.
Yes, he told me he would not be here.
Yeah.
After telling me he would.
The process.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to research it because it's sort of novel, the one that she's referencing, that group.
Fresh Pond is novel?
Yeah. It's not like a sanctioned committee per se. So I'd have to explore what's the best mechanism of a formal.
Make it like a subcommittee.
Could it be like
WAC or something?
Like the Shoreline Access Committee is what I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah.
That was sort of, formed around tops, a task. Yeah, it was a task force.
It was a task force.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a task force.
and that could be a temporary, because temporary, we can define as 2 years, 5 years, 3 months. I mean, the bridge to the more formal, yeah. So let Stephen do his magic.
Yeah.
But, and we understand the need for speed here. I mean, just that, I really so agree with the idea of pre-dredging testing and then post-dredging. To have some, and then the other, aren't we also, do we have another ask for 2 more stations?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We said, our proposal is to do 3 stations.
Right.
We can now fund 1.
Right.
With the community input I've gotten so far.
Yeah,
And then, so our ask would be to go to WQI and request the 2 additional stations, and Joe seemed to think we could work through the process to get those in maybe later this year, but definitely next year.
Yeah.
Depending on how that process had to
You go
go.
to the three, are you going to the midpoint on
We're gonna
the?
go to the
Midpoint, I figured.
because that's at our dock,
Right.
and I can spend time making sure we got it going right
Yeah.
when we first start.
right. But I also
It'll
would,
be a learning process.
but I see the advantage of trying to get the 2 other stations in, if they're more towards the beginning and certainly towards the end,
Right.
before the dredging.
Yeah.
But the dredging's not till after October, so we have a little bit of time.
Yes.
But as you say, you have a learning curve too.
Yes.
And then we have to get the structure in place. So I think we're okay, but we can't dawdle.
Right.
What would the physical layout be? Not so much layout, but who's gonna do the work?
Well, I'm going to start, and I have several people from the Menandic Creek Keepers who said that their docks could be used, and they would be willing to monitor it. My sister's going to help. My husband's here, maybe he'll help. But there are other people who will step up. Right. A lot of them are not here today, and some of them said they'd be on Zoom.
Just we need to make sure we have the commitment.
Yes, well, and I'd like to know how many we want on this committee. And what, because we've got people who are attorneys, we've got people who are in health industries and science industries.
complicate.
I know that we might want that for our association, right?
Yeah.
Unless you want to help. So, I think we can draw from a bunch of people, and Betty said she'd help me with some of this work, so that's helpful
Right.
as well.
Alice, I love the idea. I think it's a critical order body that we've been talking about for a long time. And it is deteriorating rapidly, and it has changed dramatically. And I like the fact that it's science-driven, that it's data-driven. I think the fact that you are collecting data before the dredging efforts is important. And to see whether by increasing the flow and the daily flushing of that area, with oxygen levels and carbon levels and salinity and all that other stuff, how that impacts, how dredging will help general health of that. I think it's a great thing. I love the fact, just like with Fresh Pond Neighbors Association, I love when neighborhoods want to take an active role and become involved into something that they're really concerned about. I think it's better than just government alone doing it, because they have an active interest, and it's very benefit, but it has broad range interest for all of us here on Shelter Island. And, yeah, I applaud you, the efforts. I think it's a step in the right direction.
I would say the next step would be Stephen exploring how to make it happen, whether it's a task force or something determined short term. But you guys need to figure out exactly how many people you want to have as your core group,
Yes.
whether it's 5 or 7 or,
Yes.
whatever you
Right,
think
right,
you're going to
right.
need.
Yes.
And then once you have that nailed down and he has that nailed down, then we can put it all together.
We are gathering whoever can, who's on the island this
Yeah.
weekend at my house, 16B South Midway Road at 4 o'clock on the lawn by the creek. Whoever from our group can come, and anybody else who's interested, please come.
Well, just like Fresh Pond, it's not just people that live there, it's other people with an interest,
People
so
who
you.
live with
right.
nearby,
Yeah, so-
and, yeah, and we're in a weird place, quite honestly. We have Fresh Pond, we have the Mamaroneck Peninsula
Right.
Association, and we're two sides of a creek, and we don't know the people on the
Right.
other side really very well. So it's been a difficult thing. Like, I've got a lot of people on the Midway Road side, because that's where I am, but not so many from the
Yeah.
other side, even though we've reached out to as many as we could. In fact, one of our members went around and put notes on everybody's docks over a year ago to try to drum up some interest. So we have an emailing list of 37 people, I think. So there's a body of people,
Did we get a commitment from Al Loretto and the Suffolk County of how much they're going to dredge of, how far north they're going on the dredge?
My understanding is it only goes to Tar Kettle.
I know, but I thought we were trying to push.
We were trying to get them to go to the town landing, which
Yeah.
was kind of
That would-
further in.
Yes.
The issue is the volume of organics at the bottom. It's not sand that they're
Right,
dredging,
right.
it's that organic sludge.
Right.
So they kind of draw the line when they start to hit that, because disposal is a problem. So I think they were gonna try to go as far as.
How much further would that have, I mean, it's not being dredged at all in that area now, right? I mean, they only go as.
Well,
It just right now though has gone as far as the island boatyard.
So in terms of just conceptualizing, what's the distance between where they did dredge to the end, on the north end of it? Would we say it's a couple thousand feet, or,
I think.
2 to 3,000? I think Real Point is
Yeah.
2,000 feet long, Real Point is.
Yeah, I bet it's that long. I bet
Yeah.
it's that long.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And it has been all these years, it has been an issue of what to do with the spoils.
Right.
I mean, I know, I have a letter from the Army Corps of Engineers that my father received in 1965 that they were gonna dredge.
yeah,
And they had a plan, they were gonna do kind of a loop around the creek. But they were gonna dump on everybody's front lawn, and of course, there was nobody there then, so who cared? And everybody wanted it, but it never happened.
It's about 3,500 feet, I just.
that's
oh,
what
it is about
Okay,
35.
so it's pretty.
And that'll take you right to Tar Kettle, but that's before the pinch point,
Yeah,
which is the frustrating,
right, right, if we
you
could
know,
get through that pinch point, that would help a lot.
yeah.
Through to the bend in Midway,
Yeah.
basically, yes.
Right. Yeah, if you could just get it that extra, I think it's like 500 feet. It's about,
So that's something that, rather than wait till the fall, in winter time when they do the dredging in the winter there, something that when Al gets back, I think isn't he away now, did he go to Italy for the summer or so? Oh, no, I saw him on a bike this morning, so he's still around. So since he's kind of our main contact point for dredging here on Shelter Island, might be a decent person to invite to this meeting that you're having, Al Loretto.
Okay, can you send me his contact information or give it to me?
should be on the WMAC webpage,
Yeah,
MAC, on the town.
WMAC, yeah. And he's in the phone book. Al Loretto's in the phone book. He lives over in, yes.
He's still here, yeah.
Yeah, I just saw him on a bike. Yeah. Yeah, oh, you did get an update, okay. So I just somehow, again, I think if we can just encourage them to get by the pinch point, that's something that's very important, that would increase flow dramatically. That, then you're talking about a small amount of spoils that you might have to get rid of, as opposed to, close to, what did you say, close to 3,000 feet, or 30, what'd you say? 3,500 feet, wow, okay.
Okay, so Stephen, we did a task force for the
Shoreline
shoreline,
access.
so it's not that.
Whether we do, again, we could do a task force, formal committee, or
something, I'll know it. But if you could just email me a blurb on, like, again, how many members you anticipate, what the mission statement is, and things like that, just a quick email,
Okay,
and I'll take it from there, and I'll be in touch.
okay. I will do that. Thank you very much.
You have an application before the WQI?
No, because they said we needed to be a formal organization.
Things got removed.
It's like go around in a circle here.
It's a good first step, Ellen.
Organize and then
It's
request.
a very good first step, and much appreciated by everybody, I'm sure.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is, I have moratorium next steps. We've had discussions, why we're doing this. We had discussions at the town board meeting last week. When is it going to be done? How is it going to be done? There's applicants waiting to be processed. And so I would like to start the discussion. I just, a little while ago, handed out, some thoughts. That's it. We seem to be going back and reference the Seth Harris permit as an example of things we want included. If we should list any requirements for a special permit. And I also think we need to relook at, Paul Shepard had made a proposal on proportionality. And again, we can go over his specifics, but it's more the concept of, how big a house can the land hold. So I included definition of maximum lot coverage. I showed you what Southampton, East Hampton, and Southold do. And I made a list of what I thought were possible, written in stone requirements. So if you want, we can go over those. The first one would be, just like, again, I'm going to reference the Harris property throughout this, lot merges. When there's, adjacent land, and rather than have them say, well, I could put up 3 houses, or I could do this, or I could do that. Well, if you want the big house, you commit to merge the land. So that's one concept. The second is, Meg has brought this up a couple times, total square footage of all buildings, not just habitable space. So I think that's something we need to look at is, and it kind of goes to what happened on Ram Island, where the house was the house, but they added the basement. Then maximum lot coverage, we need to talk about that. Should include all impervious accessories. The well, we've done this on pretty much all of them. Well pump at 5 gallons per minute and install an adequate storage tank. We talked about year-round rentals only at Harris. Something we need to talk about. We haven't done this, but I think it needs to be reinvestigated. It has to do with irrigation. Putting the cisterns in to irrigate for the pool and for tennis courts. But what we don't have is, I think we should look at catching the water on site for the cisterns instead of bringing it in. So that's something, just something else to talk about.
Yeah, only because there's no guarantee you're going to continue to be able to bring it in.
Right.
That's running its course.
Right.
It's just a matter of time before the
Yeah.
communities
Shut it
to
down.
our north and south say, we're not accepting water trucks anymore to go fill up pools
Right.
on Shelter Island. That's,
Okay, the IA system is kind of mandatory, but let's put it in here. All stormwater contained on property should be collected in appropriate, as containers, but, dry wells. Automatic pool cover, we've been doing on a regular basis. Energy Star and WaterSense certified appliances, we've been doing on a regular basis. This is something that we talk about, we should probably institute now. Electronic water meters on buildings and cisterns, and send an annual report to the town. So we know what's, being taken in and what's being used. Then install automatic shut-off devices in case of a water leak event, and remove any structures in the wetlands. Again, these are just things that, I looked at what we've done in the past few that were approved. And it seems like a guideline, but I think this is what we need to do is come up with, criteria. What is it we want, what's a given, that's non-negotiable, and what can we negotiate? It's mentioned a couple of times, it's like a game. The applicant comes in and asks for this much, but they really want this much. So, let's, get rid of that and just, this is what you're entitled to. And as for, then I did a little bit of an example on the lot size and the proportionality. And this was kind of a compilation of what Paul Shepherd had offered and what Southall does, and I think the village of Southampton. If you had a 1 acre parcel, you'd be entitled, or this, again, this is just a proposal, to 10% coverage. So that would be, on a 1 acre, you could do a 4,356 foot house. If you had a 2 acre parcel, you can do that 10% plus an additional 5%. So you'd be entitled to a 6,534 square foot house. Again, if you had 3 acres, you'd be entitled to the original 10, the 5 for the second acre, and then 4 for the third acre. And that would give you 8,276,000 square feet. And then 4 acres would go all that plus an additional 3 acres for a total of 9,583 square feet. And then for 5 acres and over, you add an extra 2%. So the maximum house size would be 10,500 square feet. And again, this is just, it's more, this is a concept. They're not, obviously, they're not hard numbers. But I think, we put the moratorium in place. We have 6 months to address it, and I just think we need to start the conversation.
Definition of a mega house is by definition, we consider a very, very large house, anything over 5,999 square feet. But again, when you start to get to 2 acre, 3 acre, 4 acre, and 5 acre and over, you're already above that limit. So I'm thinking this is quite liberal in terms of, because these are very large houses, 8,000 plus, 9,000 plus, 10,000 plus, even though you have 3, 4, yeah, I get it. But it is a guideline, but I would like to take a really critical look at these because.
You think too generous is what you're saying?
Yeah, I am. I am saying a little too generous, yeah.
Well, if you're thinking of it as total square footage and not the way we've been calculating
That is true.
square footage historically,
Yeah.
I think it's actually probably closer to what the reality is that's
Yeah.
just happening. So,
Okay.
if we pull assessor's data on the actual total square footage of some of the larger properties on the island, those houses and their accessory structures plus their acreage, and kind of look at what we already have, what is the current character of the community based on, lot size and house size for these larger homes, that should also give us some understanding of what our baseline kind of is going into it.
Yeah.
Just as a frame of reference.
Well, I don't think this can stand alone either. I think this has to, at some point, this rubric has to include
Sure,
all the other built items on the property,
yes.
right? For
Right,
coverage.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's one good idea. I think we need to look at all the possible options, not just one, but look at, I think there was a suggestion on the possibility of changing it from a special permit to what, a use variance or
Area variance.
area variance, thank you.
Yeah, because
So,
right now, the town board greatly restricts house size, and it's at 5,999 square feet. And presumably that was based upon a comprehensive plan. So the town board felt that that's in keeping with character of the community, that the houses should only be that size. So a special permit is easier to get by applicants than an area variance. An area variance, you would have to go to the zoning board, and you'd have to go through certain standards and criteria, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood, whether benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method, whether the requested area variance is substantial, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse impact on the environmental conditions in the neighborhood, and whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. So that might be the more appropriate way to go, is to make it an area variance and let them make the argument through those standards that it's justified. Because a special permit by definition is a permitted use in the zoning code, subject to meeting certain criteria that are a lot looser and liberal than an area variance. So I think if you want to be more protective of that 5,999 square feet, you punt it into the area variance world rather than a special permit. But I know that they're working on the zoning chapter, right, Meg? Consultants?
Yeah, that'll be in June, we'll be discussing that.
Yeah, so I think if you made that a priority of their review and, within the zoning chapter, and then they can get a preliminary report to the town board and the town board could kick that around.
Steve, just so I understand, if you're going for a variance, it will go before the ZBA then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, which, most other towns, that's how it is. Because area variants have to do with dimensions, and this is an increase in dimensions, so it's, appropriate. Like Village of Sagaponic, that's where it would go. Southold, where you referenced, that's where it goes. Southampton, their maximum size of a home is 15,000 square feet. So we're already way ahead of the game. So I think we'd be going backwards to keep it as a special permit, even with more standards. I think, you have this, like, you don't need a large home legislation because you already have it. It's 5,999 square feet. So let those applicants go in front of the zoning board and make their case that in this particular lot, that the benefit to them would outweigh the detriment to the community, and it's in keeping with the character of the community. So I think that should really be explored, that option.
So just devil's advocate, we turned over the wetlands applications to the planning board because we felt that the planning board were the experts in it and we listened to their recommendations. Are we gonna hear the same thing, that while you're turning this over to the zoning board, the town board should be doing?
Every other municipality does it in the zoning board. They are the experts on, dimensional relief. So, and again, it's a harder standard, an area variance versus a special permit. And also, if you deny one and you get legally challenged, it's a lot harder to go up against the area variance denial than it is a special permit denial.
Mhm.
So it is more protected to do it
Right.
that way. And I just wanted to update you, coincidentally, we just got the Suffolk County Planning Commission's recommendation approving the moratorium formally today. And I just wanted to correct the record. I know there was the applicant on one special permit application made an assertion that it barely passed, basically, with the Suffolk County Planning Commission. It was 8 to 4. It was 8 to 4 in favor of recommending the moratorium. And what's a particular note is that every East End town voted for it. So, and also villages under 5,000. The ones that voted against it were Islip Town, villages over 5,000, Huntington, and then there's this at-large member. So,
So what's the next step? What do we?
Just before we leave this, on the top 13 that you have listed there on page 2, can we add a 14th one?
You can add anything you want. That's just a
yeah.
starting point.
Yeah, I'm looking at pools size, maximum pool size in terms of length and width and depth,
Can we do volume?
volume.
Do you want
Yeah.
to do volume
No, yeah,
instead of the,
sure.
gallons?
The only reason I say that about depth in the near shore area type of thing is because what happened down in Silver Beach,
Right.
felt the need to have to put in a 9-foot depth pool, 100 feet away from the water, and therefore pumped out for
I mean, I think that's already kind of been covered in the fact that we don't allow dewatering for the installation of
Yeah.
pools.
Okay.
Because you can't have a pool that's going to be deep enough to impact the aquifer, because you can't dewater. So that's kind of covered already. I don't think,
But I'm just saying, on a large property where, let's say it's 4 acres, 3 acres, I say, listen, I have 3 acres, I want to put in a, 75-foot pool, length and a 50-foot wide, it's pool size, again, we're not putting in a, community pool, we're putting in a private pool for a home. There's got to be some type of, I would think volume of water might be something that you might want to look at. My other comment about the 13, 14, or whatever we decide to put up here is, let's not make all these contingent on this new formula for houses. Let's start to act on some of these things that, that if you say you need an automatic pool cover, then you can't design a pool in a kidney shape unless you figure out how you cover that, because I hear that argument constantly, like, well, it doesn't lend itself to a pool cover. It's not a rectangle. And most pools are rectangular and they slide right down for a pool cover. Well, you can't afford to have different shapes that you can't put in a pool cover. Pool covers are important for a variety of 4 or 5 reasons, but obviously evaporation is at the top of the list. Chemicals are important too, and keeping them clean and being able to use them for extended periods of time. It's just a good investment if you're going to spend that kind of money for an extra $12,000, $14,000 you put in a pool cover. If for the life of a pool, it's not a lot of money,
Right.
and it saves a lot of water. So I would like to see us,
Yeah, I would like everybody to sleep on this and
Yeah.
come up with more,
Yeah,
And that's only if you're gonna go the special permit route, because if you go on the area variance route, the standards are already there.
Well, yes and no. We want certain criteria to be met. In other words, the size of the pump, things like that.
No, that's if you're gonna keep it. If you're gonna keep jurisdiction by a special permit process, then yes, you can come up.
All right, so what if we did it the
with
other way? You're saying you can't put these restrictions in?
No, if it goes to the zoning board, they have their own criteria that they go through.
So we need to see the pros and cons of both,
so.
Sounds like we want more restrictions
Yeah, yeah,
than.
yeah.
No, but the zoning board could put those.
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
conditions on.
Yeah, okay.
It's not something that we can really codify, but it's something that we can make known that the town board is interested in those type of conditions and those should be contemplated. But it just, and again, if we keep special permit, it's weaker.
Mhm.
And you're gonna be more apt to approve than disapprove these large homes. And also, again, based on lot size, you see how big the houses can be as of right when we have a 5,999.
So I understand that, but the way maybe I'm misunderstanding it, it seems like the zoning board is gonna mostly do it on proportionality.
No, well, that's whether it's substantial, whether it's a detriment to the community, whether it has environmental harm, and then also, is it in keeping with the character of the community? So it's going to take all that into account, and those conditions that you're speaking of can be made conditions in the variance grant, if it, because they're going to start, if they get jurisdiction over this, they'll start, and then it creates precedent, and what conditions they're imposing would carry on through precedent, ideally.
As Amber mentioned, I think we want to be more restrictive.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think we have to really, let's hear what the CPF, not CPF, the comp plan people say.
Yeah.
And then maybe.
Yeah, again, we have, we really want to wrap this up in 6 months, though. I don't want to be waiting a year for that.
Yeah. I also would like to see some type of a press release of you asked the first question of why are we doing this? And rather than reading a resolution of why, I would like to see a press release, the following 5 reasons. Here's why we're putting this moratorium on for a 6-month period. Number 1, number 2, number 3, spell it out concisely so people understand the rationale of why you're doing what you're doing. Make it clear, concise, and understandable for the community. Just a suggestion.
Well, I think what we also need to look at is, now we're looking at 2 different possibilities, among whatever else we come up with. So we need to see the area variance process, like what the process is, the steps, what is considered in that process, what would potential recommendations be, and then look at the special permit process that we're currently using. What are the steps to that? What are the restrictions that can be in that? How can we define that? And look at the 2 of them and see which we think will fit better for this particular topic. And, do just a side-by-side comparison of them and kind of see which one
So
fits
Meg-
the island better.
You're talking mostly about the concept of proportionality? Or-
Well, yeah, it would be all of it. So if you have an area variance, what is the definition of an area variance?
Yeah.
Like, I need to see what the process and procedure is for, from filing an area variance to how it gets processed to what the result is, because that I don't understand right now.
So how important is it to come up with the percentages right now?
At the moment, not
Okay.
very. I think first you need to figure out what concept, what direction.
What mechanism are you gonna employ?
Yeah, so I would say let's look into both of them, what we've been doing and what an area variance consists of. And then also consider all these other things, like look at what all the other towns are doing, even other small towns up the coast, and see what kind of standards they use. And then we'll just compare them all and see what would work for us, what wouldn't work for us. Kind of make a wish list of things that we want to consider in these applications and see what we can modify and what we can't, depending on which direction we choose to go.
Okay, and I could just tell you, vast majority are area variance license. I don't know if any that are special permit. And the proportionality comes into play, you know how in Southold did the proportionality? Was because they didn't have that 5,000. So they came up with something that they thought was fair based on lot size and whatever, but you have that cap already.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing, like, I want to figure out where that cap came from, because in 2008, the cap was 8,500. And at one point, it was recommended to be 10,500. So, I want to look back at the history and see how we got to 599. So, there's history on how it sort of dwindled from what was originally thought to where it is now. So I kind of want to really kind of dig into all of it and map it all out, and I'll make a spreadsheet.
And I think the key is, what Jim said, we want to base it, why are we doing this and what are we trying to achieve?
So the public
But that's, that's.
Well, let's think here what we're doing.
It's in the legislation.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, this whole paragraph, second paragraph.
Yep.
Should be, if you want to do a press release, just lift it right here. Community character, the impact of granting such permits, community character, the environment, the aquifer. I mean,
Yes.
And it's also the increase in applicant.
But I think you could,
yeah.
and I agree with
Explain what that- yeah.
PJ,
A little more in depth.
PJ,
The houses, the more you change, yeah.
I read those
Yeah,
a little more in depth, is
Yeah.
what I would say. You spell out, those are nice catchwords,
no, I think they're meaningful.
Oh, I do think they're
Yeah,
meaningful.
yeah.
But I think you need to spell them out a little bit more.
I think also part of this is, some of this is legislation and
Right.
what we want to build in, but there's also process. And one of the things that, a number of years ago, we had property, 3 acres, I think, on Little Ram Island. We were looking, and the question was, they were going to do this big house, and we knew that there was sensitivity, irrigation, some systems had to be turned off at some point because they were failing, the salinity tests were getting too high. So what was the impact of what this big house was going to be? Like, if we allowed it, would they be salting their neighbors' wells, basically? So we have some information that came out of the SEQRA review from the hydrology study that we know where, groundwater flows and things like that. So I want to bring Joe in at some point to talk about how do we utilize that information that we now have? What do we request from applicants to say, okay, like, given what we know, how do you fit into this, and what's the impact you're going to have on the surrounding residences? And Joe has some thoughts. I talked to him briefly about it, but we need him to come in and really, more than 5 minutes, just go through this. And then the second thing is, we haven't addressed in our list yet, topography, steep slopes.
Yeah, that's a.
And, just how general topography on these different houses.
Another note I had was building in the floodplain. That's another one, because we have a lot of low-lying
Excellent.
areas, and when you get storm surge, that creates an issue.
Yeah, and topography was mentioned by John Kerr last week, I think, just that filling in kettle holes.
Right.
It's really, the runoff then just increases that much. So, yeah.
Okay. So we don't have a town board meeting next week because of the holiday, following week. Come back to this.
That sounds good. That gives a week for everybody to put their ideas together and brainstorm.
No, which committee should?
We have to be mindful that all zoning changes should be in conformity with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is currently being updated, the zoning chapter is currently being updated. So I would advise that we wait for at least some sort of chiming in from, comprehensive plan committee and the consultant on this issue. It's just good practice. They're concurrently reviewing the chapter right now.
Yeah,
Before we-
I think we can,
Currently.
I think we can do
Before we get
both.
ahead of it.
Yeah,
I think we can do both.
yeah, like
Yeah.
the groundwater, we can have Joe come in, maybe not 2 weeks.
And I think we have a lot of our own questions that we need to ask
Yes.
and not depend on the comp plan committee to ask those questions. Because if you saw the meeting last night, the questions may not get asked. So I think,
No, and that's why I'm thinking the town board should charge the consultant when this being topic number one to review in the zoning chapter. And then so we can get something to chew on.
But again-
Along with what you guys have put.
right,
The way I understand the comprehensive plan is they identify things that need to be addressed.
They might identify large homes.
Yes.
And to
But
be
then
addressed.
then we go through this process.
No, and sometimes they provide specific action items or recommendations. That's what I'm looking for, because you have a consultant that's working on this. They may have good recommendations. So instead of spinning our wheels, I understand the anxiousness to get this done. We should get it done as soon as possible. But we're talking about maybe a couple of weeks longer to wait for them to chime in on this particular topic. Instead of, and again, if you're going the area variance route, you're limited in what restrictions. However, there is some,
I know you're trying to protect us, but I like to do it concurrently.
oh, that's fine.
Because it's not all zoning, it's some of
Right,
it may be just
right.
what we request, is information, such as having educate us a little bit more on what we can do with the topographical study. In the hydrology report.
All right.
because the land use and zoning chapter goes beyond just this concept. So
But, that's what-
it's gonna be a much larger discussion than just large homes. So,
Yeah, that's why I was just saying if they could focus on that in the beginning.
well, and we did tell them that we have a current moratorium that we just passed, so be aware that this is what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing large homes and restrictions on, large homes.
Right.
And the consultants have done that in neighboring towns. They've helped with their zoning legislation for, large homes. I think they did in Southampton and somewhere else. There's a list of people. But, so they're aware and they know that that's something that we're going to be dealing with. And that's going to be on the plate.
Okay? All right, that's it on the agenda items. We'll go around the table, and I'm gonna feed off what Meg's been saying about the comp plan. I sat in on the meeting last night, and I was very confused with a couple of the PAC members saying they didn't have the data they needed for the action plans. And the way I saw it, we had everything, everything's there, so. You walk us through that a little bit? Or explain it better than I just did?
Yeah, so, a couple of members have been asking for a demographics chapter, which we have. We have a demographics chapter. We have the chapter from the original consultants, which was done in 2020, the year the census happened, that had a lot of basic data. The only part we didn't have at that time was the actual census data. So then when the census data came in, we updated those numbers that we had from the original consultants and added census data to them. We also went to PD and got updated data from them. We went to the assessors, got updated data from them, building department, et cetera. And I think that what some of the committee members want,
Let me also say,
Yeah.
also, we had a housing consultant, that brought more data in terms of need and assessment.
right, so when they did the community housing plan, they did a whole
Yeah.
data assessment as well. So we have a lot of information, we have a lot of data, and I think that what some of the committee members are asking for is, a written analysis of the data.
No, it was more of a.
I'm not,
So if action item is explore ways to expand year-round community housing opportunities, explore way, that's it. Well, where's the data to support that there's even a need for that? And it should be right there next to the action item. And now I would argue that we can trust our public to be able to read a chapter that describes the demographics, describes where how we're establishing that a need exists, or not, whichever way it goes. You can read a chapter, and then, 3 pages later, you can read a list of action items and keep in your head where the data in the chapter is that backs up that recommendation to future town boards that you should be looking at XYZ or studying this or enacting that. I think if you are going to state it in a chapter and then again state it in the action items, first of all, you can do that for every chapter. It's going to become a pretty monstrous sized document. But second, I just think it also, I don't think it clarifies. I think it muddies. So what I think I was going to try to do for the CPAC committee and see how they feel about it is take a few of the action items. I think I'll just land on housing because there's so much there are. I believe we do have a lot of demographic data. Take a few of those action items and just highlight where not some of the data might actually exist in the demographic chapter, not in the housing chapter. And just see if we can't come to an agreement on how do we make it clear that the action items are data-driven without making the product worse.
So my biggest concern as an observer last night was, is that, I was like, what do you mean the data's not there?
Yeah.
So it is there.
Oh, it's there.
Okay.
There's an entire chapter dedicated to just data. It's on the website, it's on the comp plan website, and it is titled, I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure it's growth, change, and demographics. Hold on. Yeah, it's chapter 1, growth, change, and demographics.
Okay.
There's one other.
It has a lot of the census data. And the thing about the census this past year is that it's not overly accurate. It was a pandemic year, and it shows what seemed like inflated numbers for population because a lot of people moved here just for the pandemic and then disappeared, as we know, because the school population spiked and then dropped again.
We have a way of confirming
That's
suspicion.
Right.
And we're doing that a little bit with the data. And I know that people say you can do anything you want, show anything you want. That's not the point here. The point is to try to come to a real number using a bunch of different sources, as opposed to just relying on the census because that's the official record.
And it's not even a real number, it's a trend.
Yeah.
Shelter Island is unique in that it's very hard to get hard data for the island. Just like it's hard to get hard data for the smaller communities around us. And we have a transient community, which makes it even harder to get solid numbers on year-round versus part-time versus seasonal versus, So it's really looking at trends and having conversations with groups of people equates to data as well.
Yeah,
It's not just what you get through a census or how many people cross the ferry. If an example brought up yesterday, you could talk to one shell fisherman and get his numbers for the year, but if you talk to 20, you get all their numbers. Now you have data, and it can be anecdotal because you've spoken to 20 people, but the consensus from those 20 people was this. So now you have information that you can work with.
Especially if again, all of these different data sources wind up within some range of numbers that is not too far, spread a narrow range, then again, more confidence that that number specifically, plus the trend that number is now part of, is confirmed.
Part of it was like, there was a little confusion as to exactly what was being asked for because, when specifics were requested, I wasn't really given an answer to what specifically they were looking for. And if it is specifically this action item refers to this data point, we can go through and try to add that where necessary so that people see what the correlation is. But a lot of the information you get from actually reading the text, reading the chapter and putting it all into context, like context gives you a picture. And, that kind of drives some of the action items. Like, what is your end goal? Like, where do you see things ending in 10, 20, 30 years? That's the whole purpose of the comp plan. And, I don't think it necessarily depends on whether or not 2020 was a spike in a weird census year. What's been the trend to this date? And do we think that trend is going to continue? And if it does, how do you address it? What are the concerns about that trend, or what are the positives about that trend? And how do we want the comp plan to address that trend is really what the questions are, not debating whether or not the census spike was funky or not.
Here's a perfect example of kind of what we're trying to get at here, that, how do you get to these data, seasonal versus year-round people? A proxy for that is not perfect, but a proxy for that is who in the database, in the tax roll database, one of the assessor rolls for that matter, has an off-island address. It's pretty simple.
As their primary mailer.
As their primary mailer. So that gives you some idea. So one of the statistics brought up last night is, well, how can we say we need year-round housing when, I forgot what, the last 10 years, there's been a 40% increase in housing, houses built, or existing houses on Shelter Island, and only an 11% increase in population. But that's, again, there's data being used in a way, I believe, that is not accurate of what the reality is, because maybe the 40% increase in housing, maybe 90% of that increase was for part-time people. So it's not serving the needs of the people who live here or used to live here, or would, like year-round, productive members of the community. So, yeah.
So, data's always complicated, and the consultants are working on cleaning it up and streamlining it so it's understandable for everybody.
Yeah.
But we have enough information to be able to look at the action items and what we're trying to do and not make bad judgment calls. Like, we have an understanding of the island, of the basic trends of the island. So none of these action items are going to say if you have 5 more people than that, it no longer applies. So like Noah said last night, just because you have some questions about the data doesn't mean you can't continue to move forward on these action items and goals.
Yeah.
With that being said, we had a comp plan meeting last night, and we had one the Monday before. The next one will be June 16th. It's a Friday. I know it's different. Usually it's on a Monday, but it will be June 16th, and it'll be at 7 o'clock. And we're going to discuss housing. That'll be the chapter, the action items we're going to discuss. And then the next meeting will be June 26th, which is a Monday, and that'll be at 6:30. And we're hopefully going to start talking land use and zoning. So those are the next 2 meetings, and that's the plan moving forward.
What's the idea for the Friday meeting, that we try to get more people?
Well, originally, we had it scheduled as a public forum to just have an open public meeting, get more information. But in order to really get a rough draft of the document complete, the consultants need us to finish going over the action items so that they know what direction the town wants plan to move in. And so it's the CPAC's job to review those action items. That's really the biggest part of their purpose. And so I think it's more important that the CPAC review those action items so that we can give the public a complete rough draft, and so they can see the whole picture instead of giving them piecemeal chapter by chapter. Give them an actual draft document to look at and get true feedback on what the document's going to be. Because we had just an example of what the intro to a chapter could look like last night. And people were confused. I'm like, it's because you don't have the whole chapter. You have the basic summary of what's in the chapter and then a summary of findings in the chapter. And then following that, you have the whole outline of the chapter and then the action items with more detail. But if you just look at a piece of it, it's confusing. You need to see the whole picture. So our goal is to have all the action items have been reviewed by the CPAC, given to the consultant, so they can come up with a complete rough draft of the plan, so that then the public can see it, so that we can give it to all the different committees, so that we can talk to the homeowners associations, get further input, and then do another revision by the end of the summer, early fall. So, this is really us giving raw material to the consultants so they can make a rough draft of the plan.
My concern, Meg, over the last couple of meetings is it doesn't seem like the CPAC has consensus on what they're giving to the consultant. So is that going to be a problem when the consultant gets this?
You don't have unanimity.
Yeah.
I think we might have consensus.
I don't know, you think, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, people have differing points of view and perspective, which is good because that leads to debate. And, everyone shouldn't agree on everything all the time. And so, I think that discussion and disagreement is fine. I think what people are losing focus on, which I think is what you're seeing, is what their charge is, and their charge is to, review the action items and give recommendations. And people, I think, are getting bogged down in some of the minutia of things. And part of that's because for a long time, we were doing it ourselves until we had the money and until the cycle started to hire a new consultant. And so, we were plugging along on things, doing the best we could. And now that we have guidance from professionals who know what they're doing, we would like to try to work within their framework, what they recommend. And so it is a shift in how the process is going to move forward. And really, the objective of the comp plan, the CPAC, should be to give that initial input on the action items, because that's what drives the future changes to the island. And so that's where we're trying to get them to focus their energy, not on wordsmithing a chapter, because that chapter is going to change. Like the text, the bulk text is going to change, but the action items are going to be what drive everything. So we're just trying to get people to refocus on that. And I think what we're looking at too is some burnout. I mean, the committee's been working on it for 3 years, and I think people are tired, and I think they've gotten, frustrated or, maybe lost a little bit of their direction. So I'm hoping if we take a little bit of a break, June 16th, I'll send out some emails, just kind of reminding people, setting goals, and just resending out a lot of the reference materials that we've had forever, but I think people forget that we have, just kind of as a refresher, because I think people forget how much information they have available to them in our SharePoint. So, I'm hoping that after the holiday, people will feel a little bit refreshed and be ready to re-engage.
Get any feedback from the consultant yet, or?
Yeah, they've really been working hard. They've gone over, so we gave them a whole bunch of chapters that the committee had really felt that they had finished vetting. And they went through, so we gave them, I'll tell you which chapter. We gave them the cultural resources, community character chapter. We gave them the growth, change, and demographics, so they had a base to work off of. We gave them the quality life and community institutions, community health and human services, and we gave them economic development, transportation, utilities, and governance. So those are all the chapters that they have right now. We're still working on, we sort of wrapped up natural environment, and then we have housing and land use and zoning. So those are the last 3, but they have everything else, and they've been reviewing it and figuring out how they think the content works, what structure they want to use for that content, how they want to organize chapters. And so they've been kind of planning that out. They've been working on the demographics chapter. So they've been busy, and we've gotten some good feedback from them.
Okay. Anything else? Any other reports?
What else do I got on my plate? Let's see. No, I can't even read that. Oh, yeah, the ETIP application. So the Green Options Committee submitted the ETIP application, and that's really an application. It's sort of a grant, but it's a grant for guidance. So it's not a grant for money, it's a grant for to kind of meet with experts and analyze how we can become a more energy resilient community. And it's really specifically geared toward island communities. So that's kind of cool. So we've submitted that application. What else do I have in
I
here?
think that, the application Tim Pertel put together is really
It was very well
very
done.
well done, yeah.
Yeah, the committee did a very good job. But yeah, that was the other big thing that we had going on.
Okay. Jim, two things. We had a meeting last Wednesday. Sergeant Rando represented the chief. We met with Leon's restaurant here. Valerie represented them. Great meeting. Only went about 40 minutes or so, but she's very, very pleased with the way the restaurant has unfolded. She particularly wanted to thank the community for their support. Have been very accommodating, very welcoming, and she appreciates that. The majority of the customers that she estimates, about 75%, come from the island, about 25% off island, both North and South Fork. They did close this past year for 3 weeks from January 7th through January 30th, which they're not going to do next year. So this coming winter, they will be open 52 weeks a year. That's what the plan is. They will sprinkle the vacation time out for their employees during the course of those 52 weeks, as opposed to shutting down for 3 weeks and everybody vacationing at the same time. She talked about the housing staff and things of that nature, some challenges that she's had. The biggest reason why we hosted the meeting was for safety. It's a very busy intersection. That four-way stop sign is a very busy intersection. Police Chief Reed was all over that with supervisor in terms of setting up signage there. So we do have permanent signage that blocks people from parking at anywhere near that four-way stop, and particularly on the heading west on West Neck on the north side of the road where there wasn't much of a shoulder. People, when they put their car out there, were barely on the edge of the road. So when you opened up your car door, you literally opened up your car door into that right-hand lane heading west, which was a dangerous situation. So they worked on that. In fact, what happens is when their staff comes in, they park in their parking lot on the grounds. They have their 4:30 meeting, which is a staff meeting. As soon as the staff meeting's over, a 15, 20-minute staff meeting, they go out and they move their cars to other locations to open up the entire lot. They have, on their own initiative, before we brought it up, they've contacted, and I'm not going to go into the specifics because they're still working those all out, but they have several options of additional parking other than their parking lot. So the goal is to try to keep everybody off West Neck, completely, this and into a parking lot. So that's what the goal is. And obviously with the tuck shop being open at night and stuff like that, it does represent a little bit of a danger there. So we were very concerned about that. But overall, the meeting was very good. And Valerie was very appreciative of everything that town and the welcoming of the town. So that was good.
Just in addition to that, the highway guys were installing the no parking signs on that strip today.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I think they put some temporary signs up, and one of them they put behind the stop sign, so they had to move it.
Right.
Yeah, they're putting the more permanent signs up today. I drove past and they were sitting there, getting them together.
Did they address the smoke at all?
They did.
Yes.
I didn't go into those particulars, but the smoke, they're not going to use those things in the summertime, so they don't.
They had 2 fire pits.
Yeah.
They're not going to use, but we said it might be more than that.
Yeah.
That they're aware of it, they're trying.
But she's already.
Yeah, just because I've heard.
They already changed filters now. The recommendation was somewhere around.
Like 6 weeks. and
Yeah,
do it
6
at 2
weeks. Now they do it 2-week intervals, or they'll do it more frequently. But they're concerned about that. I even brought that up about the health of the employees that work there, that you're in that kind of environment. But they are fully aware of that, and they are working on that. But the fire pits will be eliminated for the entire summer months. So that's something that they were very, concerned about. All right, other than that, I went to the 30-year partnership meeting from 1993 to 2020, the PEP. And I'm just going to go very quickly over the highlights. The goal was about climate change. The focus is about climate change and how communities need to respond. And that's not waiting for climate change to happen. It's climate change has happened, is happening, and will continue to happen. And that partnership is critical if we're going to address this important topic. There were 4 panel discussions. Before the panel discussions, we had Walter Mudgin from EPA Region 2. He's the Deputy Regional Administrator representing New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and 8 tribal nations to include the Shinnecock Nation. He talked about the strong partnership with Stony Brook University and cutting-edge research and how they use it and to their advantage at the EPA. I talked about the role of PEP. They talked about climate change, especially here on Eastern Long Island. It seems to be accelerating more here on the east end of the island than it is throughout the New York State. Identifying threats, science-driven solutions, and the impacts of a $132 million the bipartisan infrastructure legislation which was passed, which will be distributed between all 28 national estuaries, of which the Peconic Estuary is one. And then talked about environmental justice areas, serving the underserved areas, which we do have here on the East End, especially with IA systems for those communities. There's more help on the way to help people that don't have the money to put in these IA systems that need to do that as well. So that's part of the environmental justice. Fred Thiel talked about the budget being 31 days late. New York State, as everybody realizes, budget was finally passed. He opened up with, we had our first brown tide in the 1980s. That's over 40 years ago. And he said, that should have been our wake-up call. Unfortunately, we didn't get woken up until much later than that. Suffolk County has more coastline in this county than any other county in New York State. That includes Lake Ontario areas and all St. Lawrence Seaway and all those other areas, Nassau, Suffolk. East End is got a tremendous amount of coastline. Climate change is here. He talked about CPF. In the last 25 years since we've had CPF, $2 billion have been generated. If you divide that by 25 years, that's $80 million per year. Imagine that, $80 million a year generated by CPF. Obviously, we get a much smaller portion than our 4 East End counterparts because we are a smaller community, but it still has helped all the East End when it comes to that kind of money. Fred also talked about Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act, which is on the ballot in November. It supports Steve Ballone's initiative here. The fund would be financed by a 1/8% county sales tax, which would be subject to countywide mandate referendum. Currently, there are no county sewer districts on the east end of the 5 East End towns. Finally, the act would extend existing 0.25% sales tax dedicated to financing Suffolk drinking water protection programs. Both sale taxes would expire in the year 2060. 75% of those revenues from the new fund would go into IA septics. 75% of those funds are being directed to IA systems and their maintenance. The remaining revenues would be used for new sewer treatment infrastructure. The 1/8 sales tax increase would generate approximately $3.1 billion in revenue from 2024 to 2060. Additionally, the extension of the drinking water protection program through 2060 would generate approximately $1.9 billion for drinking water projects, including open space acquisitions. The only way we're going to be able to solve this problem is generate revenue. That's how they plan on generating revenue. I'm going to go very quickly through the 4 sessions. Session 1, I was actually on with Fred Thiel and Al Krupski and Richard Fleming and a bunch of other people. I gave you the key points on page 2. Becoming proactive rather than reactive. We need to be more proactive when it comes to climate change. Utilizing CLEPS, critical land protection strategy to protect critical natural resources and mapping tools. identifying climate stresses and risks, adaptation strategies. The big thing is the push for natural shorelines. The only place on Shelter Island that we know that has massive amounts of natural shorelines is Meshamek. You know, we should be looking at Meshamek. There's a lot of coastal areas. Have they had a little bit of erosion? Yeah, they have, but they've maintained those beach areas. But the parts that haven't, where we've bulkheaded it to death, take a look at the damage that has been done as a result of bulkhead. So it's a lesson that needs to be learned along the shoreline. We need to take a look at our own mitigation plan, and God, the seventh one, we need leadership to be able to bring us there. The areas of concern on Shelter Island I identified as 5 when I presented. North and south ferry ramps and plazas, we're working on them. We've been working on them for the last 2.5 years, successfully. Key road closures due to flooding. That's something that's on our radar, capital planning and mitigation plan. Real Point, the washover and the impact on Cockles Harbor. Wetlands protection, which again has been a controversial topic in the last 2 months in particular, but we'll see how that goes. And then natural living shoreline protection, which is something we should take a more critical look at. Recommendation out of the committee, sale of all homes require inspection of existing septics. It should be a requirement, and require new IA systems on those septics that don't meet a standard. That's something we should act on now. Number 2, 70% of the population on Long Island live close to the water. Understanding human passion. Everybody wants to be on the water. And even after Sandy, have people learned? Not a lot. Really look at it. You take a drive along Dune Road. They just put the houses up on stilts, like they did on the Jersey coast, like they did down on Delmar Peninsula. People just, they don't move further back from the water. And by the way, when you look at most of Long Island, you can move inland a mile, it's still in a flood zone. 2 miles, you go right to Southern State Parkway in Nassau County. Sandy flooded right up through there. All the canals, I lived in Plain East Rockaway. Their school was closed for a year because of the damage done to the middle school, high school on that canal. The entire first floor of the buildings had to be changed. So you can either anticipate that these things are going to happen more frequently. In fact, one of the people brought up a very astute point. Sandy would never have happened in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Why? Because the water wasn't warm enough at the end of October to sustain a storm on October 29th, 30th, and 31st, as it is today. The water is a lot warmer, which kept the energy going through that storm, which was a kind of an eye-opener for all of us. Second one, I'll just go through the recommendations. Water temperatures have accelerated in the Peconics at a much faster rate than anticipated. Why? Because it's not deep. It's 14 to 90 feet deep. Most of it is very shallow. It warms up sooner. It never cools down. The ice flow, no ice flow over the winter. So it never got down below freezing for extended periods of time. If that trend continues, these warmer temperatures are not going to be felt in July and August. They're going to be felt in April and May. These things are going to start earlier, not later. Number 2, decreased oxygen levels. And as you decrease oxygen levels, CO2 levels come up. Number 3, critical level to pull right now is to lower nitrogen levels. That's the one thing we can control. That's why we're so pushing on the IA systems. Number 4, agriculture in Suffolk County in the 50s and 60s, farms. This was farmland. And most of those fertilizers and everything else have now reached the Peconics over the last 50 years or 60 years. It took a while, but they're there. But what happened decades ago is impacting our waters today. We should learn from that. North Haven, interesting. North Haven's a decent little sized community. There are 20 homes now hooked up to IA systems. 1/3 of them are on the water. Shelter Island, we have over 200. Over 200 in our community. We need to keep that pace going. Number 8, number 7, need to adopt landscaping properties without the use of fertilizers. All right, got to get that message out to the public. Number 8, Southold no longer allows bulkheading on the Peconic Bay. There is no more bulkheading in the entire Southold Township on the Peconic Bay. They don't allow it anymore. Something we should think about. Number 9, we said that. Number 10, periods of drought. We are experiencing them, but when we get rain, as they said here, larger rainstorms in the Northeast, defined as greater than 1 inch, is the highest in the United States. New York, Long Island, when we get rain, it doesn't rain a lot, but when we get it heavy, all that runoff runs off into the water bodies. Leaching fields need to go down to 5 feet, not 2 to 3 feet. The leaching fields have to be deeper. Number 12, monies for remediation will not be here forever. Folks, the message is strike while the iron's hot. We should be a town that's proactive, trying to get these monies now, because guess what? It's not going to be around in 2030, and not to the extent that it is now. Number 13, we have the Megs right here. You tell your dad. Both Pedar Larson and Meg Larson came up and was cited by the Septic Improvement Program for their work. High praise was given to the Larsons for the work they've done. They actually say that, they talk very, very favorably about both you and your dad. So that was nice to hear. And that's, God honest, that didn't come from me. That came from them.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
I mean, not to interrupt that, please. When you were talking about the leaching fields, you're saying they need to be deeper or?
Deeper.
No,
Well, no, they need to be not deeper.
Further away from groundwater.
Further away from groundwater,
Okay.
correct. So now we require it only a couple of feet, but groundwater is coming up, so we need the requirement needs to be down to 5 feet. That's what they're looking to.
they're looking for a gap.
The gap, the greater gap.
Yeah, okay.
To increase the gap,
Okay, it
yes.
just wasn't intuitive.
Because
making sense.
as the level comes up, it won't touch you, not right now, but 10, 20, 30 years down the road,
Yeah.
that'll be an issue. Thank you for clarifying
Well,
that.
how it's currently designed is engineers look at the highest potential groundwater, like in a storm surge, where would the highest groundwater be? Then you start your engineering from that point up. So, right now, if the highest potential groundwater is 2 feet above what average is, then you would start engineering at that 2 feet and then add another 2 to
Right.
3 feet, and then that's where your base would be. Yeah.
Section 3, very quickly, living shoreline's a viable option. We have to start looking at it as an option for people who are not haunting the shorelines. Wetlands loss. By 2005, that was 18 years ago, we have lost 10% of our wetlands. Right now, 25% loss of marsh at a minimum today. That's what they record, 25% loss. Restoration efforts are at work. Science continues. Stuff about bulkheading, post-storm runoff, erosion and flooding is a natural process. We have to understand that. Number 7, people want to live right next to the water. We talked about that. Need to start conversations now at the local government level. We need better planning, so we need to focus in on that. And the need for nature-based solutions. And finally, section 4, changing habits, habitats and climate change. There are a number of things here. So far, PEP has completed 30 restoration projects thus far, 30. We are working on 16 right now as we speak. Number 2, CCMP is a dynamic document. Number 3, senior coastal scientists. Wetlands and marshes are changing in a rapid and a dramatic way. I asked Mashamik, they've been studying for decades Bass Creek. Could we share that information? They have the information. It would be nice to share with the town so we can take a look at other marsh areas just similar to that, so we can take corrective action and understand better what's going on. By 2030, best estimates show that the Peconic Estuary will experience about a 1-foot rise in sea level by 2030. This is correction here, number 6. In 1930, there were large meadows of eelgrass in the Western Peconics. There are none now, none. 8, 2014, we began, so we've been doing aerial surveys for eelgrass in the last 9 years. We've lost 4 of the 8 major sites of eelgrass since 2003 and 4. Eelgrass adaptation, slower rate. Eelgrass used to be able to adapt to a slight increase in temperature, just like we all adapt to slight increases of change. But when it happens rapidly, it doesn't adapt, and that's what's happening. Because eelgrass cannot adapt quick enough, it's impacting shellfish. pH levels are changing, also impacting shellfish. Getting the public more involved in aquaculture, that's been a success. There are literally dozens and dozens of people getting involved in aquaculture, which is a good thing. Number 13, eelgrass is still the preferred habitat for face scallops. 14, parasites are coming in from long distances, from further south. Seasons are changing. Diseases start earlier in the spring. Studying the genetics of bay scallops, more tolerant of warmer temperatures. They're doing that now. Cornell is involved in that. What does climate change look like? And then the link with publications with climate change. PEP, the hub of information for strong science focus, and PEP will be positioned to educate and run outreach programs. So it was a very good conference. It was 5 hours long. That was my 10 pages of notes consolidated down to 3 pages. It's a lot of work, but I wanted to tell you there's a lot of good things going on with PEP. I'm excited about the future of it, and I think we're heading in the right direction. Partnerships is the name of the game. You cannot do this alone. Perfect example, Alice, when you came up and talked about a partnership with the town and with the committee. You got to have partnerships to make it work for lots of reasons. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Amber?
Website committee met this morning, and just 2 things to highlight. One is the WAC had put on the front page the drought status. We also, like, that's a summer-long one. We also have the tax receiver on there through the end of May. But we want to bump up job opportunities and committee opportunities, because we've been advertising for the deputy clerk, town clerk's office. We now need to add part-time committee clerk position, TCOs. I think we're okay on lifeguards, but we just want to get them up there because we're heading into a season. We've got different needs. So we're going to pull drought status on the end of the month. Then when tax receiver comes off, we'll put the drought status back up. But I wanted to let you guys know that, so that if someone from WAC asks, that's why we did it. And then the other thing is we started to talk about the upgrading the website and the notification, BJ, that you've been asking.
Sounding about,
And we were going back and forth this morning because we're like, is it worth, the best system in the research is one that costs, initially we thought it was going to be about $20,000. The design work, we have a better quote of $14,000. This is from the company that most other towns are using, and not just on Long Island, but elsewhere across the country. And some that were using less expensive options have sometimes moved over to the one that we're looking at. So we're going to continue to look at that. Initially, we were like, maybe the notification, like we just do emails to people who want the information and do something that way. But the backside of the website has gotten messy over the years. We're using a platform that's really geared towards small business, and we need to up our game. And some of the complaints that we sometimes get is, on one page, it's been updated that a meeting's been canceled, but then it's not on the other page, or a document's uploaded in one place and then it also needs to be uploaded someplace else, and one version doesn't get updated to the next. So backside, we said, okay, yeah, we don't want to spend $14,000 on design work and $5,000 annually, but just for notifications. But we're going to continue looking at that. So we'll see if we can find the money in this year's budget, because it has come down from a $25,000 nut to closer to $19,000. Maybe we can hold off doing, buying a copy machine so we can find $5,000 there, but we're going to keep looking, or it'll have to be 2024 when we go through the budget process.
Is there any additional functionality that we will get by switching over to a more sophisticated system? besides the contact with the
Well, yeah,
citizens?
Notifications isn't the only thing. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, like there's the notification to people who are requesting specific notifications. There's also the whole integration of how the different pages work together.
Right.
But we
Yeah.
may also be able to do a better job, like all of the FOIL requests that we get. If we know that something is like always going to be foiled, we'll have more space in which to have this information available online without having to send a FOIL request to the town clerk's office.
Right.
Oh, that would be great, yeah.
There's lots of little threads. And Christina, you've been working with Kevin. If I missed anything in the overview? Okay. So, and that was
Thank you.
it.
PJ,
I'm good.
good? Stephen?
One thing, Mr. Supervisor, I just want to clarify the change we made to the rental law. I saw on social media, there was some questions about it. So let's just start from the beginning. We did two things. The first thing was to inject safety inspections into all the rental properties in the town of Shelter Island. So that's the easy one. The confusion occurred with the removal from vacation rentals, the owner-occupied premises. Now, owner-occupied premises is AKA accessory apartments. An accessory apartment is defined in the zoning code as a separate dwelling unit including bathroom and a single set of kitchen facilities, a stove plus either or both the refrigerator and sink, not shared with any other unit for permanent year-round occupancy. Key there is for permanent year-round occupancy established within an existing one-family dwelling or a building accessory to such dwelling. Then you look at the standards within the zoning code. Each zoning district where accessory apartments are allowed, they have these requirements for accessory apartments. You need a permit, but also one of the requirements is year-round occupancy. So that was the state of Shelter Island in the zoning code, all accessory apartments, year-round occupancy. In 2019, when the rental code was adopted, they basically trumped zoning and said you can have vacation rentals out of these accessory apartments. There was no limitation on how long the term was, so you can rent for a Friday night, you can rent for a weekend, you can rent for 5 days, 10 days, whatever.
Up to,
Yeah.
one per 14-day period.
No, not for owner occupied. That was exempt. There was no limit for homesteaders and commercial, yes. So obviously, if you look financially, it's more lucrative to do it that way than to have a year-round tenant in. If you could, rent it out during the high season on a weekend basis or a 2-day basis, whatever. So anyway, fast forward to now, we had the community housing plan came out, and one of the top priorities was to have accessory apartments available for community housing. So how would we do that if we allowed people to make use of their accessory apartments as a vacation rental? It would be hard. So that's why the law was changed, and now it reverts back to the zoning code, which says all accessory apartments must be used for year-round occupancy. So they can be rented out, but it has to be year-round. Now, it could be rented at market rate at this point, but we're hoping just by recapturing those rentals, we can now and make them a year-round occupancy that, based on that year requirement, you're going to have more maybe community housing opportunities available. The town board in the future can discuss whether or not they want to make a change and follow Southampton and Southold, which says every accessory apartment must be used by either a family member or someone off a community housing registry. So then you ensure that they're used for community housing. Right now, again, it's just year-round occupancy. So that was the change. It's pretty simple. It gets complicated with, because we're dealing with the zoning code and the rental code and whatever, but I just wanted to put that out there to explain.
The other thing is we got a letter from the Shelter Island Association, actually in the near shore overlay district. What's allowed there now? What changes are?
We didn't make any specific changes to nearshore overlay,
So now you can have guest quarters.
but not an accessory apartment.
Yeah, so you're allowed to have accessory sleeping quarters in the near shore overlay. So you can essentially have a 2-bedroom apartment above a garage as long as it doesn't have a full kitchen. And that's considered an accessory sleeping structure. So you're allowed to have that in the near shore overlay. You're not currently allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit, which would still be that 2-bedroom apartment above the garage, just with an actual kitchen. So that's the only distinguishing feature between sleeping quarters and an accessory dwelling unit is the kitchen.
And obviously, if it was an accessory dwelling unit rented year-round, it'd be more use.
Right.
Yeah, and the intent is for it to be a guest facilities.
Right.
It's not to be, it can't be rented out
Okay.
at all.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be rented at all.
And just one other clarification, the definition of family allows an owner-occupied dwelling unit to have up to 2 boarders. So you can have, so long as you're sharing a kitchen, sharing the bed, sharing the house, you can rent out rooms to up to 2 boarders. So if someone wanted to have vacation rentals and call them boarders, that's, you know.
In their house.
Yeah. So, but again, it's not a separate unit. It's you're sharing the facilities, sharing everything, and just having 2 guests.
So as a clarification, if you live in the nearshore area and you have an accessory building, it doesn't have a bathroom, it doesn't have a kitchen, excuse me. We're not in favor of renting an upgrade so a person could put in a kitchen in the nearshore area, are we?
No.
That's what the housing, the community housing board was discussing, and that's where
The confusion?
this
This-
has risen, why it's risen
Okay,
to the, bubbled up, and why we've
Okay.
gotten a letter from the SIA, is
Okay.
because they discussed it. It hasn't come to us for discussion to
okay.
consider.
So
changing.
hopefully everybody gets that clear. We haven't discussed that at all.
Correct.
Okay.
And to be more specific with the community housing board's ask is that it's not all accessory sleeping quarters be converted to accessory dwelling units. It's specifically that if someone applies for a community housing license, that they could get a license for an accessory dwelling unit. So that would require that it be a year-round affordable rental for that structure. So it would be, so it's not a blanket ask for all accessory structures in the near shore. It's just to allow those who are requesting a housing license to be allowed to make that modification. So let's say you already have an accessory sleeping structure and it's just lacking that kitchen. It's requesting permission to get a community housing license to rent that affordably year-round, and it's requesting to put a kitchen in. So it's for a very specific situation. So it's not a blanket request. That's how they were discussing it from what I remember.
Anything else, Stephen?
One more,
Stephen, people that have been renting their houses normally for, 2-week period of time, not accessory, their houses.
yeah,
No impact.
No.
There's no impact.
it could still qualify for the commercial license and the homesteader exemption.
The only impact is inspection.
Yes, yeah, that is, yeah.
I'm just saying that out loud.
No, thank you for,
You could do it, you could do it through the town, correct? Or you can hire an expert.
Yes,
cheaper probably through the town. I thought.
yes.
There's something else?
Yeah, so on the moratorium, I was just thinking a little bit more about it, maybe, I'd recommend we set up a working group of 2 town board members, myself, to come up with alternatives to present to the town board and streamline it, just so we're not all in different directions. And also, I would recommend that one of the town board members be one of the liaisons to the community comprehensive plan. I keep mixing up those 2.
We're here.
Comprehensive plan. So one of them, because they can be the conduit to the consultants and vice versa. So I'd rather do it that way to be more organized and
So two town board members and you?
yes. And, we can have Reed part of it as well. But I think that's the way we should go about it.
Okay. Amber, you have anything?
Nothing.
No? Okay, anybody in the audience, in the immediate audience, Howard?
Hi, I'm Howard Johansson. I had a couple of questions, I almost forgot. 2 items on the work set, over a half hour, and the rest of it was all on very interesting topics in housing. I think I make a suggestion that we discuss like the PEP and community housing at length, like 20 minutes, instead of being an item on per session. I know it seems, I came for 2 items, and I learned much more after those 2 items were on session. So it's misleading, I think, to the public what's going on. I'd like to have that clarified if we can in the future. When the reports from the committee come up, and they're predominantly, I mean, Jim, you talked on the PEP for a half hour or something, and that very important.
Was it a half hour? You had the 3-minute thing, was it longer than 3 minutes?
But it was a long.
No, I don't think it's misleading. I think, you know, the town board members have their reports. The
Yes.
rest of the town board doesn't know what they're gonna be talking about. But I do agree with you, if it's gonna be something more robust, that they should put it as an agenda item versus, you know, because there's just, a lot of times it's just committee updates and things that, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, but again, I don't think it's misleading. I think it's.
I just thought, anyway, I'll get back to the items on the agenda. The first one is Menantic Creek. I think we do need some sort of committee on that, but I don't know if we want to go into a town type of committee. Stephen said that we should have it like the near shore, because it's much easier than getting a quorum together and having a separate meeting, and we need a clerk, stuff like that. It's expensive to the town to have a full-blown committee. That expense is sort of overlooked. But I know there is an expense to build. So that was the first one. Atlantic Creek has to be discussed. And then I think it should be expanded if it goes to a committee to include Chase Creek, all the other creeks and all the other ponds as one big, large committee to handle all our inland waterways. Because they're all equally important to the community. The second item I had was on the moratorium. I think maybe, might just a suggestion that the sideline setbacks be looked at. It's in small properties, you still have that same setback as you have for an acre. And it's not fair throughout, so I think that should be. Last item is on PEP. Jim, could you put that link on the website, the South Ferry?
Oh, with the monitoring?
Yes, monitor.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
monitoring, okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Thanks, Howard. Anybody else? Howard?
Albert Dixon. Jim, or Jerry, you had mentioned the Harris application. I had asked at that time for a needs analysis, and I think that would be important to have.
I remember.
Have a licensed professional come in and do a water modeling for that home and the neighboring area. I think that's important now. And Jim, your meeting that you had talking about climate change.
So I didn't hear that. You called it a something analysis? Feast.
I think
PHEIS.
is it the same as a hunter demand?
Jim, I'm sorry?
Is it the same as the hunter curve demand analysis? It's different?
It's a water modeling,
Okay, okay.
You know-
So it's what I was talking about.
the given property and the neighboring property. Jim, with your report on climate change, the wetlands does become exceedingly important for protection. I will commend the board for putting forth the moratorium. I did request it. I will say I did ask for a moratorium a few years ago, but wasn't supported, but I'm glad to see you're moving forward with it now. One of the issues that I see is the accessory dwelling units. When they wrote the code 20 odd years ago, they referred to the sensitivity of the wetlands area. Water quality, surface water, saltwater intrusion. They allowed 2 bedrooms for domestics, family members, and guests. And it had to be at least 480 square feet. And that's it. Since then, applications have abused that, I feel. We have 1,700, 1,900 square foot accessory dwellings because we don't limit the size. We don't have a limit on the size. We don't define bedrooms. So an applicant can say, oh, I only have 2 bedrooms, but that's my office. That's an art studio. That's my exercise room. We don't limit things. You can have a kitchen in it. And we don't limit the number of accessory dwellings that we allow. We're allowing multiple accessory dwellings now on a property. That's counterproductive to the protection of our wetlands. As far as size, you know how I feel about the size of houses. Area ratio, I think, is a bad idea. You're going to get down in the weeds with it. Somebody has 3 acres. This person has 2.5 acres. You know, it's going to be fudging. Cap it at the size. Pick a size and cap it. They did it in Martha's Vineyard. Townships passed referendums to cap the size of a house at 3,500 square feet. Whatever you deem responsible, I think 4,000 feet myself is a good number. But anyway, you guys decide that. But area ratio, you're continuing the arbitrariness of the discussion. And accessory dwellings, we're allowing 2. There's an application in the Heights, just under 2,200 square feet. And it's up on pilings, Jim. Talk about pilings. There's another one on Winthrop Avenue. They have an accessory dwelling, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms above a garages, and they want to build a new one. 4 garage bays on the first floor, an entry foyer with a bathroom, upstairs, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living area, looks like a kitchen, and a 2nd floor deck. I mean, this is in the wetlands area. I mean, why you're taking, my point is, why you're doing the moratorium, get a hold of this. Make other changes in the code. These are loopholes that applicants, their lawyers and the engineers are taking advantage of now. And I just ask you to give it serious consideration and close it. Define bedrooms, define these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
You know, Albert brings up an interesting point that the one application that he just discussed, Winthrop Road, taking advantage. I don't know if I want to go that strong, but that being said, you know, in that case, they're going to take the detached garage and attach it to the main structure as the design. So it's no longer an accessory, it's part of the main. And so I think it's that sort of thinking that we have to keep in mind when we make these proposals, that
Does that turn it into a special permit?
It is a special permit.
it is a special permit, but still, but it's that kind of, and maybe monkeying around is a nicer way to say it, I don't know. But, you know, but I just think that that's a really good example to keep in mind of what we want to avoid.
Yeah. That's good, yeah, Albert had some good ideas that we, you know,
Some good
add
points
to our
out.
list, discuss. Okay, anybody else in this room? Okay, on the Zoom, I see David Hoffman.
Yes, indeed. Hello. Oh, I can start my video. Hello, everyone. David Hoffman. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I got called back to school for a faculty meeting. I am, along with Alice Dupree, the driving force behind the Menantic Creek Keepers Conservancy, a grassroots community-based startup organization that wants to do something about the water quality and the related issue of the navigability of Menantic Creek. And while I do not in any way object to the town looking at the water quality and or navigability of other creeks and waterways on the island, Menantic Creek is a unique circumstance, and I think warrants starting off with a committee that may have a broad purview, but has an initial focus on Menantic Creek, specifically because there is a dredging project for what we refer to as the lower part of the creek, which will have impact on those of us who are on the upper part of the creek, and also have impact on the water quality and navigability of the upper creek, because the dredged lower part of the creek will invite more boats, of which we already have quite a few, and I'm happy for that. It's fun to watch them come up the creek, realize that they're in 3 feet of water, and then do a quick U-turn. But I do think that this needs to be looked at in a comprehensive way in light of the dredging that is already scheduled for the lower part of the creek. So I would urge that our creek, because it is important to me, get first attention because we've asked, right? And other creeks ought to get looked at as well. But we are here in numbers. I guess our numbers have dwindled a little because the meeting has gone long, but we'd like for the town board to recognize the concerns that our waterfront community has organized around, and respect the notion that you are our town board as well as the rest of the island's town board, and this is our specific request, which we urge you to act on immediately.
Yeah, David, I think Albert brought up a good point that, we really need to pay attention to all the creeks, but I would agree with you that, that this is a very specific discussion to Menantic Creek. Menantic Creek neighbors, have stepped forward to say they wanted to, work with the town. So certainly that's our priority, but I think we owe it to the town to look at the other creeks also in time.
But this is a bottom up.
Yeah.
And I sort of liken this to the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association.
Okay.
They started off looking at a very specific issue. We wanted to do a private-public partnership, and that's why we started with the town, ad hoc committee or whatever it was informally, until they got their not-for-profit designation in. And the rest of the creeks, Howard makes a good point. We do need to, look at all of them, but is that not also part of the purview of WMAC?
It is, and
So, until, there's a specific neighborhood group that wants to address a specific creek, because we want that private-public partnership, wouldn't that be the right existing committee?
it would
to
be,
take that on?
and I think that, we talked about this, trying to steer WMAC into a direction by lessening their workload in one area. So we had Matt Williamson here, who has just really, dug into water testing and the results. We get, our waters are tested, but we don't really know the results until Matt
Right.
does a nice, so hopefully, yes, that the WMAC will take more of that on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Kim Nolan?
Hi. Regarding the creeks, and just this recent conversation, I think that's an excellent idea, and it should be expanded to all the creeks and inland waters, including the harbor, which brings me to the comp plan, which so far doesn't really have much in the way of talking about bays and harbors. So I think the supervisor was correct in his earlier statement that the last couple meetings have indicated some serious issues with the comp plan that's being drafted and the interaction of the task force and the CPAC and the consultants. I don't want to spend too much time on process because, we've talked about that, but I will say that the public spent a lot of time the other night on 37 action items in the natural resources chapter, which is really getting down into very serious action items for the island, and there was a lot of disagreement. And I think the supervisor who was on the meeting last night really sensed that, you know, some steps need to be kind of taken back in terms of data. Now, the consultant said, and I quote from Noah Levine, "The data doesn't tell the story that you want right now." I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think that the issue about data is a serious one. And I think that the rest of the town board who didn't listen, which is only 2 people, I guess it was like Amber and Jim, you know, there is some disagreement going on about the comp plan right now. So, okay, enough on process, but I just would finally say more public input rather than less. So maybe don't wait until the document grows to 290 pages. Right now, the document is 222 pages. And already, if you present that kind of huge document to any given member of the public, they simply can't understand the whole thing. And they can't even, you know, hone in on specific things. So, you know, I just think that it really needs quite a bit of work. And finally, yes, thank you for bringing up the letter that the SIA sent. I think our argument is a very environmental one right now. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the definitions and the particular code sections, but I could if anyone asked. I think, again, this is the nearshore overlay. These are environmental protections. They are not broken. They should be left there, and that language and those provisions of chapter 133-12 should not be altered. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Pam Demarest.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I suppose I want to just follow up on that. I guess I can start my video. I wanted to follow up on the nearshore overlay, Peninsula Overlay District issue with the community housing license. Apparently, what seems to be happening is that the goal will be to remove the one statute in the special housing license, to remove the nearshore overlay district from that. I think it's number 15 in that statute, and I disagree with removing that from the statute. And I realize that the reason it probably needs to be is because, as was discussed in the community housing board, there are a lot of buildings that have been converted, these garages, with sleeping quarters, and perhaps that's the easiest way to get a lot of volume of affordable housing on the island. Except that that's not the place where it should happen, and that's why the nearshore overlay district exists. That's why no kitchens are allowed. I agree with Mr. Dixon that these dwelling units now that have come up, these accessories with sleeping quarters, of which there is no true definition in the town code, have expanded to sizes way beyond belief. The one that he cited that I'm aware of reading the application, which is still in question, in the Heights, yes, the accessory building is almost the same size as the existing house. I don't understand how that could possibly pass muster with anyone in town. But the thought that we will strike that from the community housing license statute that law was passed seems absurd to me. That would just increase density of, the population in a very delicate region of the island. So I'm just going to put my voice out on that. I understand that there will be a presentation in a week or two to the board on it. I just would like to ask the board to review the reason why there is that overlay district on the island, the purposes of it, the reason it protects the Baymen's economic growth as well as recreation, and every other reason why it was developed in the first place. And I'm just concerned that the comprehensive plan is not going to get back to the natural resources because it wasn't really completed last night. There were a lot of more things added to the document that Meg had reviewed last night, and I don't have a copy of that. I followed along, but it was, again, a lot more information presented last night that was not available to us as the public to be able to have, a reasonable input on this. No, I understand that that's what the comprehensive plan is supposed to encompass, is input from the public. And I also would request that prior to this full draft of 222 pages, I guess Kim just said, goes to the consultant, perhaps the public gets one more week to look at it, have a comment period on it, not necessarily a full forum, but just an opportunity to say, hey, no, I finally glanced over all of it and I see this before you send it to the consultants for them to create a final draft.
To that, I would say
It's
have at
just-
it. I can't,
sorry?
to that, I would say have at it. They're there, the chapters are there.
No, I know that they
Yeah.
are, but I know that there have been changes that going on, and I have all the comments that have been put in, and I don't know if all the edits are complete or whatever. It just seems reasonable enough to have one more chance for the public just to say a few things. I mean, there might be more people getting interested as they return to the island. You don't know. I think we're all hoping for that. After
Yeah.
all, the community, you want the community involved. So I'm just gonna make that suggestion for today. That's all. But I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
So Pam, what I did to make it easier for people who wanted to look at the action items is I actually broke them out. And so on the comprehensive plan webpage where it says agenda, I actually broke out just the action items and I posted them separately. So it says natural environment action items for discussion on 5/22/23. And that has everything that we discussed and the things that we didn't even get to because our quorum ended early. So it's there for you to look at and comment on. And I kind of broke it out from the rest of the chapter so people wouldn't get confused. And, like you said, right now the document is 200 plus pages. And the hope is that the consultants, when they review it and restructure and format it and weed out the unnecessary information, will make it a shorter document and one that's easier for the public to understand. And so the hope is that the rough draft that goes out to the public contains all the real important information that we've discussed, but in a cleaner, easier format. So right now it is unwieldy, but I'm really hoping that once we give these chapters over to the consultants, they can streamline it and make it better for the public. Because right now I do understand that it is complicated.
And Meg, it's not only for the public, it's a working document. It's
Okay.
got to be useful. And to be useful, it has to be, simple. I don't mean simple-minded. I
Right.
just mean clear-cut, simple, streamlined. So,
Yeah.
that's the goal.
Well, as the current comprehensive plan exists, the document itself is much shorter than all of the data that backs it up. There is an additional appendix to it that's about, I believe it's 100 pages.
Right.
And it is mentioned in, so I mean, that's an option, I think, going forward, that the actual comprehensive plan could be a condensed version with a reference to all of that excessive data for those who are interested in reading on it. And, the question that Petra had about the data and backing up the action items is legitimate. So,
Yeah.
so as long as that data is somewhere, I think that's fine. And maybe it doesn't have to be in the main document itself. And I'm sure the consultants will help you sort that out. But I would like just a brief discussion over what was discussed last night, since we, unfortunately had to cut the meeting short last night.
Yeah.
Just again, over the natural resources chapter, just to see if anyone on that committee, because I don't really believe they had enough time to respond to everything and gather everything together after what was presented. That, just a short part of it. I realize you want to move on to housing. I understand. But I'm just suggesting to add that just to finish up the natural resources, because I don't believe it was really finished last night. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. I understand. And the suggestion about the appendix is kind of what we've been planning on doing, similar to the way Southold did theirs. It's 2 volumes. So the first is the comprehensive plan and the second is the appendix with all the backup data. And the appendix is, I think, twice as long as the actual comp plan. So we're going to do something similar with ours, because we do have a lot of studies and references that are important and that people should be able to easily access. And so by putting them in the appendix in their totality, it'll make it easier for people.
Okay, great. That really seems reasonable.
That's good.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Julie, you have anything? Okay, I'm gonna guess that's a no. I'm gonna make a motion, we close the work session, went to executive session.
Nope, special meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to close the meeting, go into a special meeting to act on a few
Resolution.
resolutions.
At the link?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Whereas the Beach House LLC, care of Adrian Angleby, has filed an application to conduct business on town property for 2023 season. Whereas the nature of the business is a launch service at the Crescent Beach, as outlined in the application. Whereas the applicant submitted $250 application fee. Whereas the town board has reviewed the application and determined that the granting of the license is in the best interest of the town of Shelter Island. Now therefore be it resolved that the Beach House LLC is hereby granted a license to operate the business as outlined in the application process, in the application subject to the following. A, there shall be no tent or chairs located on the Crescent Beach in connection with this launch. B, location of the licensee's business is subject to review and adjustment by the Shelter Island Town Police and the Shelter Island Highway Department. C, business operation shall not exceed the period between May 19th and September 10th, 2023. D, there shall be no parking spot guaranteed in connection with this application. E, the license shall not go off a parking spot at any time. F, the licensee is responsible for daily disposal of the trash created in connection with the operation of the business. G, the disposal of this trash shall be different from receptacles provided by the town at the beach. Is that G?
And it was I.
Yes.
I'm thinking it was I.
No, it's just.
No, it goes from A to B to E, so that's what I'm trying to.
No.
Next,
the license.
Next, the disposal of this trash shall be different from receptacles provided by the town at the beach. Next, the licensee shall obtain appropriate certificate of liability insurance to the satisfaction of Town of Shelter Island insurance broker. I, the licensee possesses all other necessary federal, state, and county licenses. J, the license is subject to the execution of a commerce on town or property agreement. Be it resolved that the town of Shelter Island reserves the right to revoke this permit at its discretion. Be it resolved that due to the nature of the business, the town of Shelter Island will not limit the hours of the operation. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Whereas pursuant to Chapter 33 of the Shelter Island Town Code, Sylvester Manor / Stephen Cyril, 80 North Ferry Road, has requested permission to hold the annual Farm to Table Benefit Dinner to be held on June 24th, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And whereas the required fees have been submitted, and whereas said applicant has requested an exemption from the noise ordinance, now therefore be it resolved that said request is hereby approved. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Whereas pursuant to Chapter 33 of the Shelter Island Town Code, Tom Hoshagan, on behalf of the Shelter Island Recreation Department, has requested permission to hold a Music by the Beach event to be held on June 28th, July 26th, and August 16th, 2023, from 4:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. with rain dates of July 5th, August 2nd, and August 23, 2023. And whereas the applicant has requested an exemption from the noise ordinance on said event dates, now therefore be it resolved that said request is hereby approved. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Whereas pursuant to Chapter 33 of the Shelter Island Town Code, the Shelter Island Historical Society at 16 South Ferry Road has requested permission to hold their third annual musical to be held on July 20th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., with a rain date of July 30th, 2023. And whereas the required application fees have been submitted, and whereas the applicant has requested an exemption from the noise ordinance, be it resolved that said request is hereby approved. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Whereas pursuant to Chapter 33 of Shelter Island Town Code, Shelter Island Historical Society of 16 South Ferry Road has requested permission to hold a 1970s dance party to be held on July 29, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And whereas the required application fees have been submitted, And whereas the applicant has requested an exemption from the noise ordinance, and be it resolved that said request is hereby approved. So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now I'll close and make a motion that we close the special meeting. Go back to our work session, work session, and make a motion, we go into executive session.
For what reason?
For what reason? To discuss, thank you. Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thanks, everybody.